Good evening, everyone. I'm Serena Singh, your host for the evening, and delighted to welcome you all to this session of WiTalks Leadership Connect with a senior leader from Optum Global Solutions India Private Limited. And before I introduce him, a very quick update on the fact that at Women in Technology, we are always here to support and take you all through various initiatives, activities that help support your career and your growth within the technology world. So, thank you very much once again for joining. I am an ex banker with 26 years of work experience, a coach, mentor, and social entrepreneur, and delighted to be associated with WIT-ACE to support a lot of these initiatives. Our today's guest is Alind Sharma. And as I go through his profile, I think all of you will really see the great value that he brings in terms of the experience that he will share and some beautiful pieces of wisdom that I'm sure he will be sharing with all of us. So, Alind Sharma, a Vice President, Human Capital at Optum Global Solutions India Private Limited. Alind brings 25 years of experience in human capital management, working across leadership roles with international and Indian companies. Alind began his career with the strategic planning team at Ranbaxy. He moved to HR and covered roles that managed diverse groups. After 6+ years with Ranbaxy, Alind was appointed as global CHRO for Denmark Pharmaceutical. Here, he partnered with business leaders to support exponential growth over 8 years. Tata International appointed Alind as their global CHRO in late 2010. The focus here was an overhaul of people systems and building the leadership team. Following TIL, Alind was the regional HR lead for Monsanto till late 2015. He then joined Pfizer as India HR lead and subsequently took on larger cluster and regional responsibilities. His last role with Pfizer was regional HR lead manufacturing for Asia Pacific. Alind is a postgraduate from IIM Ahmedabad with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. Alind, thank you very much indeed for joining us today, and absolutely an impressive and a very delightful profile. So, any introductory remarks from your side?
Well, Serena, thanks a lot. First and foremost, I'm very glad to be here. It's rarely that one gets an opportunity to kind of step outside your, shall we say, closeted role in leading and managing, and get to have a freewheeling conversation with folks drawn from all walks of life and across different spheres. Overall, I would say I'm your classical run away from the shop floor, get yourself an MBA kind of a person that a lot of my people in my generation did. Right? So in that sense, other than the richness of the experiences that I carry, I don't think I have anything much to differentiate me from. Right? It's the same old saga. It's the same old story that you would have heard for people that kind of use education as a passport to going ahead in life. I'm part of that bandwagon. Thank you.
Alind, same old story, but I'm sure there are lots of interesting new elements that we may not have heard about, in the past. So, again, your journey has scanned over so many industries: pharmaceuticals, agriculture, trading, engineering, service, and retail as an HR professional. Um, any other tidbits besides the same old that you feel would be very useful for us to know, and especially how has the role of an HR professional evolved over time? What have been your observations, and what would you share with us?
Sure. Look, if I was to dig a little deeper, into my experiences over the last 25 odd years, I would say it's been a very interesting mix from a very highly entrepreneurial kind of an environment, which I perhaps saw in my first two employers, to a situation where one has to kind of figure things out differently, do a lot of very different things. And then, last but not the least, when you work with the so-called multinational world, there is a different set of experiences that you go through, where the robustness of the decision making as opposed to the speed of that decision, tends to take paramount, importance in terms of how you run through things. So yes, whilst there is obviously the plethora of industries that one looks through, a lot of different roles, it's also the kinds of these experiences that really matter. And for me, that's been very important. How you go across, what do you see, how are the different environments in and around you that shape you, really make a lot of difference, right? Uh, if I cut to the, how HR or the role of an HR person has evolved over the last 20 plus years that I have been in HR, I would say it's also got to do more with the way the expectation of what human resources should be delivering has been kind of triggered, right? So if I go back to the really old classical model, right, the expectation was more in terms of the personnel management or industrial relations kind of an environment where you were looked upon as, timekeeping, running compensation, recruitment, so on and so forth, right? The focus then shifted as larger organizations started growing. We started to see the emergence of some of the transnational organizations. So it was more about understanding various cultures, understanding various geographies, focusing on finding the right people, ensuring compliance came into being and became an important part and parcel of it. Uh, I would say the next step beyond that from an expectation perspective was the entire space around helping leaders to create, shall we say, engagement, helping leaders to define shared behavior or culture, right? So from a continuum perspective, it probably started at building efficiency through cost and allied means, and then it would probably move into this entire span around engagement. And when I look at where we are today, I think we've kind of graduated into how human resources can help not just leaders, but the larger organization in springboarding us towards empowerment, right? And today, when we look at, say, the pandemic situation around us, it's only accelerated a lot of what was already happening prior to that, right? It has brought to the fore a lot of the recognition, which was perhaps a little under the surface. It's now kind of bubbled up to the top, right? Uh, so overall, I would say, yes, there has been a transition, but that's also a transition more driven by the expectations, right? And today, as we stand, I think HR professionals are now beginning to realistically carve a space for themselves, are really, figuring out how they can deserve us, a seat on the table. And very simplistically put, I think we are now starting to put back the human element in the human resources piece.
I think that's a very, very interesting, last sentence that you said, which is bringing back the human element in human resources. And, while we will all living in this age of automating and, as you said, cutting costs and getting a leaner, meaner model in organizations, getting the operating rhythm to be kind of very focused on, I guess, more transactional than the human aspect. Probably these things become very valid. And you spoke about expectations and environment. As to very key concepts as I heard you speak. Um, how do you see the role of HR kind of becoming different as we move towards this more digital age? So while you did speak about getting into the more human aspect of it, but now digital age is kind of booming, and with the pandemic and the environment having changed so much in the last 18 months or so, how do you see that playing forward?
Well, so see, like I mentioned, what the pandemic has brought to us is, amongst a lot of other misery, the good point is it has accelerated a lot of the change that we were beginning to see for, I would say, the last 5-6 years, right? More and more of organizations, and this is across industry, across geography, more and more organizations were beginning to realize that they perhaps need a better way to not just engage but also empower and move folks forward, right? So let's take a very simple example, right, which a lot of the tech world is seeing today, right? We are seeing a lot of attrition, right? We are seeing a lot of people moving around. There's folks with 3, 4, 5, 6, job offers in their hands. And a lot of it is landing onto the manager's plate as a bit of a surprise, right? Whereas in the earlier environment where, you would get some of these early warning signals, you would actually have, a kind of a smell of the place, you have a touch and feel parameter. Now, with that going away, literally, with the bulk of our populations working at home, with a lot of transactions happening like this, over a screen, uh, that brings to the fore, I think, a very, very important aspect of how do you continuously engage with the employees in the virtual world, right? Uh, and digital means, technology means are actually a fantastic way to try and overcome that. Right? So let me try and embellish what I'm saying, with an example. Let's look at the employee life cycle, right? So you start first with the recruitment process, right? Now earlier, candidates had to come across, sit through 2, 3, 4 rounds of interviews. In today's day and age, and in fact for quite some time, people are kind of fast forwarding that, right? You don't need to necessarily go through so much of time. You don't need to go through the same set. You can, in fact, even record a short video of yourself and send it to your prospective employers, right? The good thing for candidates is that you can actually reach out to multiple employers in the same breath, right? The good thing for employers is that you can, assess the process and move it faster, right? So that entire layering exercise and the linear process of recruitment has completely been replaced. And that's a very, very simplistic example, right? People are or have been using AI and machine learning for a long, long time in the recruitment space. The pandemic just came and kind of pushed things ahead. Right? Similarly, when we look at, say, our entire onboarding process, now a lot of focus has shifted in terms of between the time an offer is accepted and the person joins your organization, how do you use digital means to ensure that he or she is engaged, right? How do you ensure that you can make your employee as productive as possible as early as possible, right, without losing the thread of ensuring that it's an engaged process, right? Similarly, if you look at all spaces around, say, performance management or the way managers engage with employees, the way we look at our policies, a lot of corporate India and maybe even the world, the policies are written for people like me, right? The so-called Gen X, whereas 90% plus of our population are millennials. They don't just identify with those. Now what's happening is you can use digital means to actually, trawl the surface and understand what's really working and what's not working, right? And even when we looked at exits, for example, right, we'd like to see anyone that leaves the organization as an ambassador of that organization. And you have ways and means now to be able to trawl that, to be able to kind of keep in touch, keep connect, create alumni networks, right? Organizations did that in the simplistic way. Now they're able to actually do it with a lot of power behind it. So pretty much every part of the employee life cycle, I think, has completely undergone a change and will continue to do so at a fairly rapid rate.
Sure, and you may have partly answered what I'm going to ask as my next question, but specifically talking about Optum and the steps taken by Optum to build a work culture and remote collaborations in this virtual world, and this work from home kind of world. And there are lots of interesting names that people have now given to this way of being. So what could you share with us, and for all our audience? And sorry, just before you say that, we have a lot of questions coming in. So, requesting all the participants again to please put in all their questions, and I will pick them up just a little bit towards the session, maybe the last 10-15 minutes. So please go ahead and put all your questions. Thank you. Yeah, Alind, over to you.
Thanks. So what a lot of I spoke about is also realizations that have come through from the last few months that I've been with Optum, right? What we are trying to do first and foremost is to ensure that our leaders and managers are aware that what they have done in the past is not necessarily going to help them from a future perspective. I think that learning and that understanding is a critical step, because see, you cannot coach and guide and push managers and leaders into doing some things. It has to come from within, right? So one of the areas that we've really focused on, through some of our programs, especially, directed towards our first and, second line managers, is for them to understand and realize that, hey, empathy is a stronger suit that you should be wearing, and not to confuse empathy with sympathy, right? Because moment you have that level of empathy, you are able to actually answer that question saying, so what's different now? What has really changed? How's the environment shaping up differently, right? A lot of our learning programs now, we are kind of trying to shift them into an on-the-go kind of an environment, right? We don't want a situation where either a manager or even, for that matter, an employee has to go through, sitting in front of a camera and spending about 6-7 hours a day in going through some basic fundamentals or an instructor-led training, right? Some bits of it obviously are unavoidable. But more than that, what we are urging folks is to look at shorter, smaller modules, right? And we are driving the same philosophy in terms of asking managers, when they engage with their employees, saying, don't get into, a meeting that's half an hour for something that can be done in 5 minutes, right? Be more open to using other tools, like say, a Teams environment or using Yammer, right? Or just reaching out and connecting, right? Given that, most of our people are not in offices, given that, we can't realistically have everybody coming together for those old school ways of lunches and dinners, we have to find various means to ensure that that engagement stem, becomes harder and stronger. And that's the other backbone of, what we've been trying to ensure that the employee experience becomes stronger, right? A lot of what is being looked at or asked for today is also about how do I as a person identify with the larger mission and vision of the organization, right? For somebody who's, say, an associate or a first line manager, the visibility to a larger enterprise, which is far away, is extremely low. For them, that visibility is their immediate first line, second line manager. And that's the other thing that we are trying to push forward to say, hey, as an ambassador of the enterprise, what are you doing to connect this individual through a sense of purpose into the larger mission, right? So yeah, broadly, I would say, that's the essence of what we've been trying to do over the last year or so.
And that was absolutely very heartening to hear. We have all, I think, heard stories from friends, colleagues, other connections within the industry on, for some, how difficult this work from home has been. While we do know there is a set of privileged ones where you have the space, you have the logistics, and you have the wherewithal to kind of make work from home a pleasurable experience. But while for some there have been a lot of constraints and you know um, not as easy a way to just say, oh, it's the same for me to work from home. And what I've also heard, Alind, very interestingly, is that while initially a lot of people, of course, had to do this, and we all, being resilient as a human race, got into our own way of handling with what came our way. A lot of people were really actually very keen to get back to office and back to the routine and back to separating out that work and home, the blurred lines of timing which have happened across many industries and for a lot of people, and how to get that line back to a solid so that your balance could be more than what you just call it in words, work life balance. So those are some of the things that at least I'm hearing, and I'm sure you've heard that too. um, Looking back at challenges that you may have handled through these 18 months, let's say, as an individual, as a professional, but also if you look at some of the years that you've served across so many industries, what were those difficult moments that you had? What inner monologue happened to you? What were those, I would say, brutally honest conversations that you had with yourself to kind of stay on course and to reach here?
Well, look, let's look at from a recency perspective, right? I joined Optum in June of last year, right? from June till today, it's been what, about 15 odd months. I haven't been to any office of the organization, right? I'm based here in Mumbai. My office is in Gurgaon, right? I haven't met anyone in my team. I haven't met anyone in the leadership face to face, right? Now, one of the things that I have realized is, that ability to connect, that ability to build my own credibility, uh, which in any other new organization in the past would have taken me 4 to 6 months. Today, I've reached, in about a 12 to 13 month kind of a time period, right? So that's one, significant challenge, right? If I cut to the other end at, probably very early on, in my career, I've seen a lot of union action. In those days, there used to be a lot of militancy, right? And I've had a couple of occasions where, I've been get out, and there have been a lot of, difficult elements. And running through the journey of life, I can, look at difficult conversations, with reps in Brazil, to, difficult situations in Vietnam, and across the board. I think the one common thread for me in terms of how I have been able to deal with all of these situations is, this desire to create a balance within your own head, right? The desire to say there are things that you can control, and there are things that you can only influence, and lastly, there are things that you can do nothing about, right? There's no point in, focusing or wasting your time about things that you can do nothing about, because that's beyond you, right? The balance will only come when you focus on what is in my control and what is it that I can influence, right? And if you focus on those things, that balance in terms of how do you present yourself, how do you appear, how do you create a perception about yourself, how do you manage, an acute or a chronic situation. I won't say it will become easy, but it will become easier to live with it and to digest it, right? And when you start looking at the word balance, you will see it in every walk of life, in pretty much everything that you do, right? Whether it's about, how do you keep yourself mentally and physically fit, whether it's about how much of work that you should do, that you talked about the lines being blurred when we are at a work at home environment. Somewhere or the other, you have to find a way to figure that balance for yourself. So, if I had to answer you in one word, I would say balance.
Thank you, Alind. And again, as you said, one, balance can also mean different things to different people. Balance for each of us as individuals changes, over the stage, age, phase of life we are in. And hence, I think for me also, what I have observed is to understand for your own self what that balance means to you is very important. And then, doing what has to be done. I think you very beautifully articulated, what you can control versus what you can influence versus what you can neither control nor influence. So where do you spend your energies and your time and your resources? And the other thing, again, just as an experience or what I hear from a lot of people is specifically women do not sometimes ask for help and support. And to get that balance, it's important to ask for that help and support. And so, one thing that I always urge, all the people that I coach and mentor, and a lot of women, of course, is if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So ask, and then take it forward from there. Um, my last question for you before we go on to quite a few questions that I have from participants is advice to women who are part of the WITES community. What would your advice be to us?
Mhm. Uh, I'm just going to carry on a little bit from the previous conversation, because see, the ability to influence is now a way of life, right? It's one of the defining parameters, and I love the way you articulated the need to ask for help, because influencing is not just about rationale; it is also about relationships, right? It's a combination of both, right? And you cannot form relationships if you are not vulnerable to the other person that you're trying to form that relationship with, right? So that's just a little piece I thought I would throw in, right? Uh, in terms of advice, especially for all the members who are on this conversation. Uh, I will give a very simple example, right? My mother was somebody that really influenced me a lot, right? She got married when she was 16, so all of her high school and college and post-grad education she did whilst having 3 children, right? She was a very successful lawyer. She's also a double MA in Hindi and Sanskrit. And she did all of that as also running the household, So in a sense, she embodied the superwoman, right? But the one thing that I realized is I don't think she ever thought of herself as a superwoman, right? Uh, I don't think there is a pressure on anyone out there to become a superwoman, right? That's my first piece of advice, right? Don't put yourself under the pressure to say, I have to do this, I have to do that, blah, blah, blah. Examples like my mother are probably few and far between, right? You don't have to necessarily emulate them, right? The one other advice I would do is find out, what really works for you. What gives you, the joy in life in order to be able to do that. And that is essentially the most important thing. That ability to find out that, hey, this gives me the real joy in life, realistically will define pretty much everything for you. Right? A third point that I would say, again, based on my experiences, never regret a decision that you have taken. There's no point in wasting time over analyzing, oh, I could have done this versus that, right? Regrets will always stay with you. The day you allow regrets to overpower you is the day you will necessarily find yourself slipping away. So every decision that you make, at the point that you make that decision, it's the right decision. Hindsight is a fool's scratch, right? I can always think back and say, 3 years ago, I could have done X. Sure, I could have. I didn't. I took a decision based on information available to me, my environment, advice from my family members or peers or whatever, right? Today, I look back and I say, okay, when my son was young, I should have spent more time with him, right? But that's a call I took. I was traveling 16 days a month at that time, right? I pretty much missed my son's childhood. I don't have a time machine. I can't go back. But today, my son's 21 years old. Can I be a good friend to him? Can I spend time with him? Does that give me joy? If it does, go for it, right? Last but not the least is, especially as women, you will face more challenges than the men folk around you. It's a given. It's not going to change in the near future, right? So be ready to understand that these challenges are real. They're not going to go away. Conscious or unconscious bias is going to be your companion for a considerable period of time. What you can do about it is, if you spot a bias, don't hesitate to call it out, right? Make that choice for yourself and say, yes, this is a challenge. It's my choice to either ignore it or to take it up. And if I want to take it up, then I must ensure that I call out these biases. Don't let them be, because if you do, they will multiply, right? Last point, think about how can you develop an enabling ecosystem around you, right? What is it that you can do to find either co-workers or family members or friends who can help you with that, right? That asking for help is as true about this creating an ecosystem as well. That's my few bits of advice.
Alind, I think the 2 points that resonated with me a lot, one is the whole piece about regret. And you're absolutely right. In hindsight, it's always easier to think of a different way you could have thought or done things, or made a different choice, etc., etc. But like you said, one, um, it's much easier to do now, thinking of a past moment, but you can never recreate the circumstances and your actual
Mhm.
thoughts and feelings at that point of time, right? So it becomes almost like a redundant kind of discussion to have with yourself. So I think absolutely I would echo and endorse that piece that you spoke about. The one thing, which is a little bit of a provocative, I guess, question from my side, in terms of the conscious and the unconscious biases that there are. And like you said, that some of those may take longer to change. But again, when we have a lot of us, and when I say a lot of us, I really mean that there are so many people that we speak to, that I am in touch with, that I'm sure you know, who are so convinced that what has been happening in the last so many years, especially in the context of the Indian society, with reference to gender biases, or the whole unconscious bias piece, it can be changed. And what is it that we all can do as a
Mhm.
community to expedite that process?
Well, look, it's not all gloom and doom, right? There have been significant changes, that have been happening, right? And that realization is across most blocks of society, probably more urban than rural in a country like ours. But something as simple as having different gender bathrooms in petrol pumps on the highway, right? That has changed significantly in the last 10 years. Right? Now, how has that happened? There's obviously been a conscious effort behind it. Right? And that is multiplied many fold when you look at it in, say, corporate India, or you look across what a lot of the governmental agencies are doing. There is a realization, right? And to me, that's a significant first step in any such process about, I would say, reducing biases, whether conscious or unconscious. It's that realization that's most critical, right? Uh, are we there as yet? Perhaps not. I think there is still more a battle to be done in terms of helping a lot of individuals go over that hump of realization. But there is significantly a change that has happened, and I think our focus should be more to, in a sense, show a mirror to a lot of people and help them get over that process of realization. Right? Like when you look at a lot of so-called I&D programs in corporates, they will always build a very quick business case around it. Right? Most good corporates would have a strong business case. Right? We do as well. But how do you take that business case to the last manager? Right? How do you stop that last manager from asking questions like, so when are you going to get married? When are you going to start a family? People still ask those questions, right? And that's not because they mean it, negatively, or they want to kind of push down somebody. They just don't understand. They don't have that realization. So I think our battle is more about getting that realization across.
And this whole piece, as you said, about this stereotyping of women, and especially whether it's marriage or the associated respect that comes with marriage in the Indian context, is sure enough things. And I guess my point was that you're right. There are changes happening, and there is uh, a higher level of awareness than there ever was. But I think the question that comes to somebody like me always is the pace of that change. And with so many like minded people
Mhm.
agreeing to that change needing to happen, how can we make it a leap instead of baby steps? So just as something that came to my head. But with that, if you're okay, I'll move on to the questions from our
Mhm.
participants. I'll go first in, first out,
Sure.
and some of these
Sure.
are, things that you may have covered in bits and pieces, but I'll just read them out in any case for all the people who've taken the trouble of putting those questions. So thank you all very much. Please do
Mhm.
continue to put your questions. We have about 10 more minutes, so we are more than happy to pick any of those up. So the first question from one of our participants is, what is the most important area one should focus on while reskilling and upskilling to stay relevant in the highly competitive tech industry? And I think that's a fantastic question. Thank you, Priya.
Mhm. I look, first of all, thank you for asking. I think this is a question that we, uh, if there's any question that gives us sleepless nights, is these, right? Because in today's day and age, things are changing so fast. But I think the bigger question to ask here is to step back and say, what's the learning agility that I have? Right? Skills are important today. I'm not denying that. But skills and the requirement and the need for skills will change. Right? The more successful individuals and organizations will be those that can learn faster. Right? So let's say something like a Pega is very important today. Is it going to be around 3 years from now? Who knows, right? So knowing that today is important, it's good. But knowing that I have the ability to be able to upskill myself is pretty much the done thing as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Ellen, for your views. And of course, Priya, if I could just add my one bit to this, is that um, reskilling and upskilling is very important for you depending on what you aspire to be and where you want to be. So I think it's important for you to do an assessment of your own skills, and I would agree with Alind too in terms of your ability to learn quicker, faster, better, and what are the tools that you can use. And then, with respect to where you want to get, do a bit of a gap analysis on where you are with those skills required, and that's what you could possibly focus on. So, hope you found that useful. Next question is, Alan, what advice would you give to women who are either returning to the workforce or joining the workforce, now during this time?
Okay. See, one simple piece of advice is set your expectations very clearly and look for roles that would match those expectations, right? Especially if you're coming back into workforce after a bit of a gap, be very sure of what you will do and more importantly what you will not do, and thereby look for opportunities that marry that along with obviously your experience, your skill set, what have you, right? uh, don't try to do too many things at the same time, right? Multiplexing and multitasking is a bit of a chimera. It's more important to say, I am kind of restarting baby step, bite-sized pieces, and then build on top of that. At the same time, having said that, don't let go of your ambition. Ambition is important, right? Your desire for growth and creating a growth mindset for yourself is very important. But be very sure of what you can do, and more importantly, like I said, what you cannot do. And especially when you join in times like these where you probably don't hit an office, or you don't have a face-to-face interaction with people. Sometimes your laptop takes 2 weeks to get delivered. You're slowly fighting through a VDI or a right kind of a thing, and I've been through that, so I can pretty much empathize with that, right? I think the thing to do here again is to go back and say, this is what I can control, this is what I can influence, let me stay with that. If I have additional time available, let me be very curious to say, beyond just the realms of my job, what else can I pick up? Because this is a great opportunity for you to utilize some of the time to add more to yourselves, right? Don't let go of the opportunity. This is a chance also where you can do more than what your job requires you to do, because you can reach out and stretch, right? But at the same time, be patient with all the infrastructural hassles and all the issues that will come with you. Be kind to your managers. They're also going through it for the first time, and a lot of them don't realize that this is very different, right?
Yes, these are indeed very, very different times. The other one, I think, again, very interesting question. I'm not sure like, whether in the purview of what you look at, but absolutely your views would be very useful. How can analytics help us to be more proactive in planning programs and identifying potential improvements in HR?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an endeavor that a lot of folks have been at for a significant period of time, right? And I think a lot of analytics is already being used in some form or the other. That glorified piece of being doing predictive analytics is quite true in today's day and age, right? There are organizations that run models that talk about where attrition can happen. There are models that talk about how efficacy of learning and development related programs can be done. There are also models that talk about how we can improve the impact of a particular process that we are running from an employee engagement perspective. So a lot of it is already being done. And I see applicability at every step of the entire employee life cycle. Whether you're looking at how my workforce planning is happening and how my vacancies will get generated, whether you're looking at how can I, at the lowest time, at the fastest, or should I say, the lowest cost and the fastest time, find people that I can hire. How do I become better at onboarding? How can I ensure that my learning and development programs are landing correctly? What are my employees looking for, et cetera, et cetera. As in, I can just go on and on. I don't think there's anything where from very simple to complex processes, analytics is helping everywhere. It's already something that we are seeing happening and have been seeing happening for close to a decade now.
Sure. Thank you, Alind, for that. The next two questions actually are a little bit connected, and you've picked them up a little bit in what you've already said. But if you could add anything further, and these questions are as follows: um, How has the new normal brought about changes in work culture other than bringing in work from home, oblique and hybrid model? And linked to this also, I would say the next question, which is due to COVID, Pfizer FinTech has already adjusted to work from home. But when the work from office resumes in the future, what are the possibilities to continue work from home for returning mothers, for example? That's one of the questions.
Well, I can take the second one first because there's a very simple answer. I think the possibilities are significant out there, right? And it's not just about returning mothers. I think it's about pretty much everyone. Classically, most organizations are involved and have been involved in figuring out what's the kind of people that need to come to office, who are the guys that can completely, or people that can completely work from home. And then there's the so-called hybrid or tethered model where you come in, for some time or the other. It ultimately depends on what the organization wants to be driven by, right? And how much believability is there in the organization. And I'm not talking about productivity level or accuracy level or what have you. It's more about, I have a role, can I think about it differently, right? Or can I turn around and say, I need this person to be in office because of XYZ reasons, and have a very good rationale for it. Can I then ensure that not everybody gets into the same space? How can I move people around? That flexibility in assigning roles is important. So to me, the possibilities are very high, right? And we will see, especially in the technology space, a lot of the so-called hybrid working, a lot of the tethered working, where people come in only when it's really needed to. And then to kind of move on into the so-called new normal, right? I think the single largest challenge that is there today is that of ensuring engagement. And I don't think being virtual is a problem. Right? I think the real issue lies in how do you utilize that. Right? So like I mentioned about empathy, that managers need to have some time ago, right? That in itself is now coming to the fore, right? I spoke a lot about how we need to bring the human back into to the way we look at the way we manage. That again is another way that the new normal is actually saying, hey, you can't live without me, right? So empathy is standing up and shouting from the rooftops, and so is the human piece. So is the entire space around purpose. Overall, I would say it's not a new normal. It's just the old normal with one layer of the onion peeled off. Right? We're still doing what we did earlier, but we are now laying emphasis on slightly different areas.
Absolutely. Alind, we are nearly towards the end of time, so maybe I'll just pick up one more question, though there are quite a few. And of course, we also have some comments here, including a few people who are wanting to write to you to ask you a few things. But I'll let the WIT team handle that and, see how we can get that organized. And maybe some of these questions can be answered offline by us for the people. But let me just pick any one,
Sure.
and which is a very interesting one if I could pick this. And this is. How can we handle biases diplomatically?
I think the short answer to that is you can't handle biases diplomatically. You have to confront them, straight up. Now, by that, I don't mean that one needs to get aggressive about it or get into in your face. I think what I'm saying is be assertive, call it out, say that this is something that you're observing. If you have multiple data points, feel free to bring them to the fore, and then help the individual or individuals or the setting at which you've seen that bias to realize that, hey, this is a bias. Many times folks don't realize that, right? So there is nothing diplomatic about it, right? You have to face it up. You have to call it out. Be nice, be polite. I'm not saying be rude. I'm not saying be aggressive. All I'm saying is be assertive.
And I could not have agreed with you more. So, when I read that question and I was smiling as much as you were, and my answer to that was don't handle it diplomatically. Be upfront and clear and absolutely transparent about it. And there's a what and a how. So, of course, we want to do things ethically and in the right manner, but there is no reason to not handle it in that kind of open, transparent manner. Alind, there are a few other questions, and I think some of them would merit responses. But again, I leave the details and logistics of that, off the session. But I do want to thank all our participants for being so interactive and really sharing thoughts as well as these, advice questions that they've put out for us. So, any last closing comments from you, Alind, before I conclude the session today?
Well, look, first and foremost, a big thank you to everybody that's participated, the organizers and to you, Serena, for helping me through this conversation. I must say I've quite enjoyed it, and as a good HR person, I love to talk. So you've given me a platform for it. Thank you once again. My only advice is I think I would just echo the points that I had made earlier, right? Figure out where you can find joy for yourself. Be ready to make choices, but then don't fret about choices that you think haven't happened well. Learn from them, and last but not the least, be very, very intentional in terms of what is it that you want to do. Don't think, okay, let me look at this, let me look at that. No, think it through. Ask people for advice. Use people as sounding boards, but take a call, and ultimately you will realize that some things work out, some things don't. Don't hesitate to step back and say, hey, this didn't go as I planned. Not a problem. Let me look at something else, right? Time is our greatest resource, our biggest enemy, but also a good friend. Depends on how you use it.
Alind, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation with you. Thank you very much for sharing with us your experiences so openly and with so much of transparency. We truly appreciate that. And once again, thank you to all our participants who've joined us today, heard Alind, and who join us for all our WiTalks series. So please do continue to do that. And thank you for being so interactive and asking us questions. As I said, my favorite one is if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So please do ask. And all the very best to all of you. And see you again soon. Thank you once again, Alind. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Yes. Bye.